Hello and welcome again. In this section of the presentation, we're going to talk a bit about socialization, the ways in which a person becomes a member of a society, and different ways of interpreting that fact and what that fact might mean. Let's begin with some definitions. When we say socialization, what we mean is that socialization is, first of all, a process. What is it a process? It is a process in which people experience things and interact with social facts and social institutions, and in that way, they learn the practices, they learn the cultural ways of the society of which they are a part. We can take as an assumption, which might or might not be a good assumption, that people enter into the world when they are born with no identity, knowing nothing. But they encounter some things. I mean, in a way, we can talk about people making their identity, but some parts of their identity are already made for them. Simple facts, the language that you speak, the fact that exchanges are made through the vehicle of money, things like this. They constitute fundamental elements of how a person acts and who a person is, but they're not facts that are chosen or created freely. When you are born into the world, they are already given. They have the power of social facts. Now, what socialization does is it creates a link between the individual in the society and the environment in which they are living. And what makes a person human is this social quality, is the fact that they live in a society. I mean, we can talk about humans as a particular kind of animal, but the qualities that make them human are social qualities. Without the fact that we communicate with other people, that we cooperate with other people, that sometimes we come into conflict with other people, being a human would be a fact that is not very meaningful. It would mean that we're a sort of animal that is, for the most part, fairly poorly equipped by nature to function in the environment in which we live. And so we develop these things like houses, clothing, heating, all human creations that make it possible for us to live in this environment. And that's what makes a person human, is the fact that they've learned to function in a social environment. If we can talk, at least theoretically, about people being born and growing up in conditions of complete isolation from other people. This is rare, it's very rare, but it does happen. When this happens, they will behave in ways that are not socially recognizable to other people. They will not be, if we want to use the kind of vulgar term that's used very often, perceived as being normal. Now, how does socialization happen and what does it mean? Well, let's first look at a functionalist view. According to the functionalist, or from a functionalist perspective, our ability to function as human beings depends on us being socialized, and the ability of the society to function depends on people being socialized into it. That's why, for example, functionalists will often talk about a minimum degree of conformity or a minimum degree of similarity among all of the people in the society being necessary in order for society to function. There are some degrees of difference that are desirable, some that are tolerable, and there are some, if there is really fundamental difference over the values that are expected, over the practices that are normal, then societies will be unstable from the functionalist point of view. Now, societies endure. The life of a society is longer than the life of any individual within that society, and the society endures because members of new generation learn and internalize values, norms, practices, language that are common to the society, and this is through a process that is labeled as being cultural transmission. So the basic assumption of functionalism is that societies are enduring, they are stable. The members of societies will change because people are born, people die, and so on. But the basic structural characteristics of society, they will change over time, but are fundamentally persistent. The society will continue to endure. Now, as you can see, this is a perspective that emphasizes in socialization elements that make all of the members of a social environment similar. In contrast to this, the conflict perspective takes a more critical approach to society, and it argues that socialization has a purpose. Now, functionalism also argues that socialization has a purpose, that is, to preserve the stability and survival of the society. The conflict perspective emphasizes the point that this operates to the benefit of particular groups within the society. So socialization is a means of persuading people to accept things as they are, to accept the existing state of things, or if you want to use the Latin term, the status quo. And a lot of the conflict literature on socialization concentrates on questions like class and questions like gender. It argues that socialization encourages people to accept the divisions and inequalities that exist, and to regard them as being natural, or to regard them as being an inevitable part of the social environment. So, if we want to talk about this in terms of class, the idea, the fact that more luxurious conditions, more opportunities are offered to members of the more privileged class encourages the perception that members of more privileged classes are somehow inevitably, perhaps naturally, better, that they have advantage that they deserve, and so their advantage is maintained. This is why a lot of the literature on socialization that emphasizes social difference looks at institutions like education and explains how working class children are educated in a way that prepares them to accept working class jobs, that children in the more advantaged classes are educated in a way that prepares them to administer and dominate the affairs of other people. And we can make a similar argument about socialization into things like gender difference and gender inequality. In a social interactionist perspective, one of the main ideas in socialization is proposed. You can see a picture of him there by Charles Horton Cooley, an early symbolic interactionist. The idea of the looking glass self. Looking glass is an archaic term meaning mirror, and he argues that the way that we perceive ourselves, our self-concept, is a product of the interaction in which we engage with other people and the impression that we gain of how other people perceive us. So we imagine the way that we appear to others. We imagine ourselves in a kind of mirror, but a mirror that is defined by the perceptions of other people. And we imagine the way in which people react to what we are. Our image of ourselves, and our image of ourselves is also an evaluation. Our judgment of ourselves is a summation of the way in which we imagine that other people judge us. And what this means is that the social environment is very powerful. We can talk about this, a popular term would be peer pressure, but it's our perception of how we fit into the group and how we are perceived into the group, that this has a very strong influence on behavior and identity. So these are three different perspectives on socialization, on the way that people become the kind of people that they are. And again, don't think of them as being mutually exclusive. They probably all work together. That socialization is a way in which societies are preserved. It is also a way in which differences and inequalities in society are justified and preserved, and it operates through this complex system that has to do with the exchange of meaning and communication, the consequence of which is an understanding of self. So these are three perspectives not meant as alternatives to one another, but probably all as things that work together into constituting the identity of people within a social context.